Hello again, everybody. It's Patrick Murphy, RN, and this is After Work, and this is Abigail. Here, lean in a little bit closer so they can see you. Yeah, there she is. And I'm done with work, and you're done with school, and here we are again, driving home. Well, how was your day today?
Perfectly, what was the term I was looking for? Perfectly acceptable.
Perfectly acceptable. Good. Yeah, I just had one visit to do today because one of my patients is in the hospital, so I picked up a couple of visits from one of the other nurses and got to catch up with one patient I hadn't seen in a long time, and he was doing well, looking pretty good, so that was nice to catch up. And now I've got to spend the rest of the day getting ready for my partial exam tomorrow on the next video assessment I have to perform. And this should be a really fun one. But it does require being shirtless, so I've recruited one of my male friends to help me with that. And he is a pretty interesting character. His name is Dustin, and he's got his own YouTube comedy show called My White Friend. And him and his friend Dustin and Justin, they've got this comedy show. It's hard to explain, but if you're interested, go look it up, My White Friend. It's very strange. But he's a very funny person, and I'm sure there will be a lot of good witticisms and bedside banter when we do this. But the only day he has free to do it is tomorrow after 7 p.m., so tonight I have to make sure I've studied up on the specific assessment techniques they want performed in the video, and make sure I'm ready to do them all smoothly.
Drawn up an eye chart for his chest.
Draw up an eye chart for his chest now. Well, some of the feedback I got from the one I did with you was that I did the tuning fork assessments totally wrong, and I'm fine with that because I think they're useless anyway for general screening, and the textbook even says they're useless for general screening, so I was just kind of like fooling around with it. And she said the eye chart, you were supposed to read the whole line and not just a single character, but we just made up the eye chart anyway, so I got a 90 anyway.
Does your teacher watch these?
I don't know, I don't think so. But maybe, because I gave her the YouTube link to the version of the assessment video I posted on YouTube.
He was kidding about making up the eye chart.
Yeah, I mean, with this one, there's going to be a lot of palpation and percussion of the abdomen and the back, and assessing the major blood vessels and things like that. And these are actually assessments that I do more often, so I think I'll be a lot more confident with them than I was with the head, ears, eyes, nose, throat, and mouth exams, which...
they're more useful than the tuning fork thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do a lot of assessments of the oral mucosa and stuff like that. I mean, that's stuff that I do a lot, and, you know, like a lot of inspection, but, you know, as a normal part of my work, I don't often palpate lymph nodes or do other things like that. And in one of the other assignments, one of the SOAP note, case note studies thing, some of the feedback the instructor had for the whole class was that nobody commented on the blood pressure. The blood pressure was high and the pulse pressure was high. There's like a large difference between the two numbers. But, you know, to me that looks like a relatively normal number, but then I realized that's because most of my patients are in heart failure. So I just didn't think anything of it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of a crappy blood pressure. Whatever.
Isn't everyone's blood pressure like that?
No, not everybody's. I mean, I guess, you know, thinking...
I just like that your standard of normal has shifted to dying people.
Yeah, that's true. But, I mean, you know, it wasn't... I mean, from the other stuff in the assessment, she wasn't symptomatic. She didn't have a headache or anything. And it wasn't so high that I'd be asking for, you know, a stat one-time blood pressure medicine or anything, you know. My intervention was to just keep monitoring the blood pressure. But I guess, you know, we're supposed to go into a little more depth in these case studies, so it was feedback well received. I understand what she was talking about. I gotta really consider everything. I got some good feedback from one of the students on pointing out that amiodarone is a good thing to ask about when you're doing an assessment of the thyroid gland, because amiodarone turns into iodine in the body, and that is very important for the thyroid gland. But I'm actually surprised I got a 90 on the assessment, the video assessment that we did, because it was kind of like thrown together at the last second. I didn't procrastinate until the very last second.
I think you got bonus points for the hilarity.
I don't think she gives bonus points for hilarity. I don't think it's that kind of class. These people are PhDs in nursing, you know. Not to say that they can't have a sense of humor, but I'm sure they take our classes very seriously.
But I'm sure that at ease with some semblance of our human humor is,
Yeah.
a useful skill.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an important thing to do. Dustin was concerned that his hot bod would distract all the ladies. I told him that was just fine.
Oh yeah, well your instructor's a lady, so it should get you bonus points, right?
No, I don't think that's how it works.
Well, I mean...
Though he does have a boy band, so maybe he can favor us with a tune. Dustin's boy band is called Boysterizer. It's kind of it's like a parody boy band, kind of like what are some other examples, like Lonely Island, like that kind of thing. It's like a comedy
Do
boy band.
any of your tests require that he sing?
No, there's no singing tests.
Well, he could sing as you percuss his chest in
Well,
tune with the beat.
He does have a little leeway in things like, when I ask him to say something while I'm listening to his lungs and stuff, a couple of things like that. I'm trying to figure out how the camera angles are going to work, though, because some of it he's got to be laying down and some of it he's got to be sitting up. And,
Well, if you need the camera moved, I could be behind the camera repositioning it as you do the test.
yeah, it's hard to do that smoothly. I mean, I'd like to just have one stable camera angle that covers both positions, but I'll have to do, we might have to be a little bit farther away, but I haven't even really figured out where a good place to do it would be. Because for the test for jugular venous distension, I have to have him laying with his head up at 45 degrees.
Maybe him on the couch and then the camera on a table a little bit away so that it would be up and on.
Yeah, but the problem with the couch is when I assess his back, he's got to be sitting up and facing away from the camera.
Okay, well,
So that would, or maybe
there
I
wouldn't
could,
be a problem if he's flexible.
yeah, I mean, because he's young and healthy, I could have him just lay in the prone position, but in reality, none of my patients ever lie prone. They always lie supine. So I want to try to make it as realistic as possible from that perspective. So we got this, we had this, our quality manager came to our morning meeting today, and he told me about these ridiculous surveys that our primary caregiver is going to have sent to us 3 months after the patient dies, and it asks all of these ridiculous questions like, how confident were you that you knew what to do at the end of life? Or like, how confident were you that you understood the person's care needs or whatever? And there's all these really poorly worded questions.
But the thing is that generally the most confident people are complete idiots. There have been scientific studies.
Well, I mean, the other side of that too is that if people were completely confident, they wouldn't need nurses to come in and help them. I mean, that's the other way of looking at it. And there's the person who's the primary caregiver is not always the one who's at the bedside. Like, the survey might get filled out by somebody who was only there for the last 2 or 3 days, or the primary caregiver might have delegated everything to a family member who lives closer. So they might not even be qualified to really answer these questions meaningfully anyway. But not only are they going to publish the results of these surveys online, they're going to tie our scores on them to how much money Medicare reimburses us. So
That's bizarre.
yeah, so it's actually going to impact our wallets. And they're trying to work on a system where regular Medicare home care patients who aren't on hospice but just getting regular visiting nurses or whatever, they're going to tie their Medicare reimbursement to performance, to what extent the condition of their life is improved. But we always get horrible scores on those metrics because our patients consistently get worse over time, and if they're not, we discharge them. So
Yeah.
we have horrible scores on those things.
Just by nature of your job.
Yeah, but it just seems really silly to tie actual reimbursement to these subjective questionnaires. I mean, it seems like such a poorly conceived idea. Especially because if the only way to keep the same level of reimbursement we get now is to get perfect scores on every single question. So anything less than perfect means we'll get less money.
So
which
they're
is-
just looking for an excuse to pay you less without getting the fight back that they would over pay cuts?
Yeah, I guess. Well, I mean, it's not pay cuts. It's
Reimbursement.
It's
or whatever.
decreases in Medicare reimbursement. Yeah, that's big. I mean, we get a lot of money from community fundraising, but the money we get from Medicare is huge too.
So it sounds like none of them are actually stupid enough to think this is a good idea from a care standpoint. They just want to give less money.
Yeah, I guess, and like everybody's telling us to teach from the test. Like when we're talking to patients, to use the word confident and ask them, "Are you feeling confident?" And to keep working on them until they say they do feel confident. So there's more likely that they'll subconsciously answer affirmatively.
But I
those
mean,
questions.
That sounds like something that would sort of negatively impact care if you're worrying about convincing them that they're confident as opposed to addressing needs at the bedside.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, the confidence of the family caregivers is important for patient care. Oh, put that seatbelt back on.
No, it got stuck.
But it's an important thing to do. But we're kind of being asked to plant specific verbal ideas in the heads of the caregivers. I mean, we're given an artificial task. I mean, it seems like maybe from a financial or resource point of view, this might make sense to somebody, but from the point of view of actually providing care at the bedside, it's providing yet another layer of hindrance onto that, because now we have to worry about not only are we actually doing a good job, but have we planted the right keywords in the heads of the caregivers also, as if we didn't have enough things to do already, as if we weren't busy enough.
Are you taking care of the person? Is the caregiver all right? Have you planted the correct subliminal messages?
Yeah, exactly.
When really you should have a machine for planting the subliminal messages.
Well, yeah, maybe that's something I suggest. We could hook up a neurophone. I'll have a neurophone broadcasting from my sternum at all times, resonating at 8 cycles per second, ultra low frequency.
Or just cue cards.
Yeah.
Flash, you're feeling confident.
Yeah. Well, and just some people are never going to be confident. Maybe the confidence in some cases is not an achievable goal. Maybe the caregivers themselves have their own underlying psychological problems,
That there's no time or ability to address.
Yeah, we do what we can, and we have social workers who are excellent counselors, and they're really good at what they do. But they're not a replacement for let's say if that family caregiver needs psychotherapy and psychiatric medications, we can't provide those to them. It's up to them to take care of themselves to a certain extent. Although we're there to help as much as we can. But it just seems like a really ridiculous way to go about things. And the hospital community, or the community of nurses who work in hospitals, have, in the nursing blogosphere, have said a lot of the same things about Press-Ganey scores, which is pretty much the same thing for hospitals. Same concept. It's like a customer satisfaction survey.
Are those widespread?
Yep, they're widespread, they're mandated, and they do impact how much money the hospital gets. So they've already done this in hospitals. They're just starting now to get into it in nursing homes, home care, and hospice.
It just reminds me of those little surveys you can fill out at restaurants.
Exactly, that's all it is. And it's determining how much money people are compensated for the work that they're doing. Which is horrible. At our local hospital, they had a big wide mural that showed the Press-Ganey score of the hospital, and then they had to add more paper to the bottom because it went below the threshold of what was represented on the paper, and then it was so low for so long they just took the whole thing down because it was embarrassing. But I mean, if you think of the experience of being presented with one of these in say an emergency department, what if the person in the emergency department is a drug seeker? And they checked them out and found there was nothing wrong with them, and
did not give me drugs.
They did not give me drugs, and let's say they had filled 3 prescriptions for Dilaudid in 2 of the local pharmacies, and they had it on the computer, and they've just been bouncing from emergency to emergency room trying to score drugs. Well, of course they're not going to be satisfied, Or
subpar drug dealers.
Yeah.
Should be ashamed.
Right. But there's a lot of confounding variables in it, and all my elders and betters could say about it was, well, everybody's in the same boat. That's supposed to make it any better, But I mean, I'm not really looking at it in terms of how are we competing compared to other how are we competing compared to other similar local agencies? I mean, that doesn't seem like it's really the point.
I mean, if the other local agencies are using leeches and you're not drawing blood anymore, that's good, but still not ideal.
Well, and hospice is so new that there's plenty of room in the market for everybody. I really reject the idea that hospice agencies are competing with each other, because way more people could use our services than actually get them, and the adoption of these services is still growing. You know, like the hospice movement is only about 50 years old or so. You know, so it's a relatively recent paradigm.
I hadn't realized it was such a new idea.
In the United States, it is. Yeah. The UK's had it for longer. I don't know when it started in the UK, but the Connecticut Hospice in Branford was the first inpatient hospice unit in the entire country, and that was established in the 60s or so. That one's unique because it's actually run by the state. It's like a state agency, so they always take a different view on the legislation that they kick around, because their situation is completely different. They're run by the state. They're not a private non-for-profit, or they're not a private profit company, for-profit company. And we've got both of those in the area. We've got home care hospice agencies that are private non-profits like ours, and private for-profits like a couple of the other ones. And the actual growth right now is the for-profit ones. The for-profit ones are springing up faster than the non-profit ones, which just seems ridiculous to me that you would have something like a hospice agency and then have it for-profit. Because the only way, I mean, I'm not entirely sure how this works, but what that says to me is that means that they can turn down patients. Because I was asking, what the heck? I was asking, I ran into this MBA who worked for DaVita, which is a dialysis company. They do renal dialysis for people, but they're a private for-profit company. And in the United States, you cannot be denied hemodialysis for lack of money, no matter what. And one of our previous presidents, his wife had end-stage renal disease, and he passed that law. So I asked this master of business administration who worked for DaVita. He gave me his card. He was like recruiting people. I said, well, how do you make money if people can't be denied dialysis? And he said, well, we're a private company, so we can deny people dialysis. We can pick and choose our patients. So we can just pick the patients who have insurance policies that are profitable for us to deal with. And that's the answer. You know, it's pretty interesting. But some of our patients have like really good insurance, like TRICARE or Blue Cross or whatever. But some of them have state insurance, and some of them have no insurance, and we have them on grants. There's like a patient care fund where we pay for stuff out of grants and things like that. We've taken care of homeless people. We've taken care of people who live in campgrounds. And I like the idea of working for an agency that does that. I'm not making any less money than I would be anywhere else. I'm making the same as I made in the nursing home.
And you seem to be having more fun.
Yeah, a lot more fun. Oh, here we are. Well, I do miss running around and putting out fires at the nursing home, though. There's a lot of fun doing that. I'll probably go back to supervising a nursing home one of these days. Once I get my master's, then maybe people will take me seriously.
That's Master Patrick Murphy to you.
Maybe like Master Shake.
Thanks for the ride.
All right, no problem.